Club football on this weekend. So many games across the country, Michael Verney. There's no better place to start than the Dublin Football Championship this weekend. Ballybun Kickham's against Skerry's Harps. I think we're expecting a bit of a free taking exhibition. Dean Rock hasn't half put pressure on himself now, especially that some of the prices for the free taking sessions have gotten out there. Like, can you imagine let's say there was full crowds allowed at games this weekend. Can you imagine what would be roared in at him as he's standing over his first free?
Stop, yeah, and sure, the minute he misses a free or whatever, it's just going to be it. Sure, listen, he started up a business, he's put himself out there, but you know the way the GA is, people are so kind of, I don't know if miserable is the nice word to use, but they love an opportunity to jump on something like that. So like the minute he misses a free or anything happens, it could be like it could be like that 45 or the free he had underneath the Cusick to win last year's drawn All Ireland match, and he could miss that, and people are going to be absolutely abusing him. But listen, when you put yourself out there, that's probably one of the repercussions of it.
I think people are going to pay it. I don't think it's not necessarily like, obviously he's getting hammered at the minute and it's flying around social media, but I think people are possibly already offering this sort of money to Gaelic footballers, especially Dublin. They're the most high profile of the lot, and I think people are going to actually recruit him, and whether it's a birthday party, whether it's clubs, whether it's just rich parents in certain parts of the country, I think people probably will pay it.
He's gotten some free advertisement for himself over the last couple of days. He was trending, I think it was the highest trending in Ireland on Twitter at some stage yesterday as well. And even Cara O'Kane had a tweet about he basically went through his own kind of goalkeeping masterclass, and he was taking the proverbial with it as well. But I think probably people probably will pay it, to be honest with you. That's the way it's gone. Like I'm not going to throw figures out there or name names, but like, there's people presenting medals, there's people coming to clubs doing various talks, be it about mental health or gambling or otherwise, and doing all sorts of different things, and they are commanding big fees. And you know that as well as I do. It's the fact that this is probably the first time anybody has probably actually ever seen anything written down, where you're able to see, we all hear the different rumours. Oh, the Dubs are charging this to come down and present medals, or whoever is charging this to come down and present medals. That's the first time we've actually seen something like that actually written down. This is what he's actually charging. But yeah, as you say, I think people will pay it.
Do you think he's the best free taker in the country? It's probably, on the biggest day, he's done it more than anyone else has done. So I think it probably has to be him. But Shawnee O'Shea wouldn't be too far behind for one.
Yeah, someone had up on Twitter, how much did Shawnee O'Shea charge him for his coaching session when he gave him coaching session? I'd say Shawnee O'Shea could be there in a couple of years. A brilliant free taker. I suppose what really sets Rock apart has been those clutch frees when big games, particularly the GPS game with Lee Keegan, when he threw the GPS on the ground or whatever in front of the ball. Those big kind of clutch frees, he seems to always deliver, in fairness. Yeah, they are huge fees or whatever, but listen, I'm sure he was advised or guided by someone, or in that field, about what are your services actually worth. And I believe Johnny Cooper has started a bit of a kind of a consulting business in recent weeks as well. So it's interesting to see. I wonder, would this have happened under Jim Gavin's watch? That's just me throwing it out there. I'm not sure if it would have had. But I suppose each their own. If he can make it, maybe more luck to him. I don't necessarily agree with it, and I don't particularly like it, but he's spotting an opportunity or a gap in the market, and he's taking it.
I think across the country, people are always identifying opportunities and fleecing as much money as they can for it. So that's capitalism.
But it's like this, Shane. If we're going to bring this up, you need to bring up about various managers who are absolutely milking clubs all around the country.
Yeah.
Absolutely milking clubs, and it's kind of massaged in various club accounts for AGMs and maybe team expenses or whatever. But that's been happening since, as you say, since God was a boy. So if we're going to raise about Dean Rock, it should probably be raised all the other fees. And basically, they're not saying Dean Rock's not a professional leader. He obviously is an amateur, and he's offering a service or whatever. But some of these Lachicos going around to clubs, absolutely fleecing clubs, and going from one club to another and one county to another, and leaving a lot of clubs in financial peril. That probably needs to be raised as well.
Lachicos, what a term. Ballymundo, serious underachievers. I wonder how much losing that All-Ireland final, was it all the way back in 2013 to St. Bridget's of Roscommon, how much that affected them as a group and just the mentality moving forward. Because like, if you look at the players they have, both current and past Dublin players like James McCarthy, John Small and Paddy Small have obviously come through in the last couple of years. Dean Rock, of course, Alan Hubbard, he was in with Dublin. They've so many class players there. It's almost Davy Byrne. It's almost inconceivable that they wouldn't have added to it. And I know St. Vincent's were just so dominant there for a while, but what a team they've had.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of used to always think that as well, that it was inconceivable that they hadn't won more than they had. And then I started thinking about it, and I started asking people about it, and kind of digging into the figures maybe of the Dublin Football Championship. I think the Dublin Football Championship is different this year for many reasons, but I think the most obvious reasons why it's different is that they should have sole access to their county players, which they have never really had before. So Dublin Championship would normally really properly kick off probably mid to late September after Dublin and won All-Ireland. Lads are kind of limping into club training almost, and it's actually more of a hindrance. I know this sounds a bit silly, but it's actually more of a hindrance to have county players than it is to not have county players. So case in point, Ballyboden won last year, and to the best of my knowledge, Michael Dara, they definitely didn't have a starter with the Dublin team, and Michael Dara McCauley was the only one that really was getting game time with Dublin. The year before, fair enough, Crokes won, then Paul Mannion, Keane Sullivan. The year before, Vinny's won, really just Dermot Connolly. The year before Vinny's won, it was really just Dermot Connolly. The year before Bowden, it was really just Michael Dara. The year before Vinny's. Then you go back to Ballymunwin in 2012. If you look at the teams that got the finals, Thomas Davis, no representation to the best of my knowledge on the Dublin panel last year. St. Jude's 2018, apart from Kevin McManaman, no representation on the Dublin panel. Ballymun were beaten in that final. Castleknock, only Kieran Kilkenny in 16. Vincent's in 15 again, we're talking about the same players. Oliver Plunkett's on Rua in 14. I think Bernard Brogan was the only one at that time. So, like, Evan Comerford was sub-goalie with Ballymun last year, and he was sub-goalie with Ballymun and Dublin because what do? You build a game plan around your goalkeeper. You build a game plan around your kickouts. And if he's not going to be there, that's nearly more of a hindrance to us. We can't just bring him in and things are a disaster on Championship Day. Not saying that they would be, but he hasn't been there and he hasn't practiced. So I think it's a different championship this year because teams that normally were crippled by not having their county players now have full access to them for the last month and will have full access to them until the end of the championship. So I think it's a different type of championship completely this year, and maybe it's the sort of championship that Ballymun, they won't be decimated without 5 or 6 players the whole way throughout the year. They'll have those players now.
That's true, and actually the leagues are taken very seriously in Dublin, and it's kind of to different levels across the country otherwise. So you would actually be building your game plan very, very strongly, and you want everyone to understand each other's role and how we can have a fluid game plan. So what you said is actually really, really interesting and on the money. Thomas Davis, who you've mentioned, county finalists from last year, and they were a brilliant story last year. They're against Round Towers of Lusk this weekend. St. Jude's against...
Just on that chain as well, I had a Thomas Davis club woman. She kept saying to me, just keep writing us off. Keep writing us off. Every week you've written us off. You wrote us off in the quarter-final, you wrote us off in the semi-final, we wrote them off in the final. And they were delighted. It was almost like going against Bursalee the whole year. And I went against him in the All-Ireland final, but I think I went against him in the Tip semi-final, Tip final, Munster semi-final, Munster final, All-Ireland semi-final. So some teams it's actually a good thing to have me or you going against them.
Okay, so then in Group 2, St. Jude's against Nafina. I think this is two teams that shouldn't be too far away from challenging for a Dublin title. St. Jude's because they haven't been far away before. Massive physical team, and they have a lot of quality there, and you've mentioned Kevin McManaman. Nafina, you would say they were fairly robbed last year against Ballyboden, went to extra time, and of course there had been that bit of a schmozzle where what's his name again, Conor McHugh ended up getting sent off when he shouldn't have. Like, he was basically sinned against, and he'd been on fire against Ballyboden, and of course the Baskels led Ballyboden all the way to glory that year, and even in Leinster. So they're two strong teams there. Lucan Sarsfield's against Ballantyre. Group 3, Whitehall, Colmkill against St Vincent's. Interesting to see how Cormac Costello gets on there. Diarmuid Connolly, can he kind of continue to lead that? Can he lead them back to a county title as that team begins to fade somewhat from the dominant year that they had before? I think that's going to be a tall order.
Yeah, and I know Ger Brennan was playing, they played Sarsfields from Kildare in a challenge game a couple of weeks ago, and Ger Brennan was playing, and I was just asking him, because I was at the Bray Emmets game over the weekend, and he's manager of Bray Emmets, and I was asking him, I said, you're still kicking a bit or whatever? He says, oh, he's doing a bit, but he said that Bray was kind of the priority, and he was just happy to be back kicking a bit after a couple of bad injuries recent years. I think he's a hip injury, and he had Achilles tendon as well, but Vincent's do look like they're on the wane, and it'll be interesting to see if Conley, even been there for a good while, can maybe resurrect, and even Ger Brennan playing some sort of a role with them, whether it can resurrect them. But it does look like there are 3 or 4 other teams that are probably ahead of them in the pecking order at the moment.
Absolutely. Then you have Clontarf against Ballyboden, the champions. I wonder, will we see much of Jack McCaffrey? And of course, obviously he works in healthcare on the front line, so I suppose depending on the unit you work in and the amount you're being exposed to in terms of the pandemic, that does give you an interesting decision. And that's something you're seeing across the country. I'm not picking out Jack, but that's across the country. These are the decisions that players are going to have to make, whether they live with someone who's vulnerable, whether they work on the front line, whatever it might be. But I think everyone is very interested to hear why Jack has stepped away from Dublin also.
Yeah, I know of a couple of nurses playing camogie and playing ladies football that have stepped away, and you can't really have any argument with that. It's, to be honest with you, not having an argument with it. They're actually doing they're actually doing everyone a favour in many instances. Really,
it's very noble.
It's a very selfless thing to do, really, to be honest. I know Jack McCaffrey had been based in Kilkenny. He was in Kilkenny Hospital up until recently, maybe early July. And I'd imagine he'd still be playing club because, mate, listen, I don't know. I'm just saying because it would be less of a commitment, and he might be able to work around it. But we don't really know. We're not 100% sure whether Chris Barrett is eligible to play. The transfer is kind of moving at the moment. I believe he'll be eligible to play, but I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, Chris Barrett, the Mayo defender, he lives in Clontarf, and I think he's been training with them a good bit over the last couple of years. Transferred from Belmullet. Interesting interview with Enda Varley in today's Irish Independent. He obviously transferred up from Mayo to Vincent's in recent years. He'd obviously be an important player with Vinny's as well. But he was just saying about how difficult it was for him, even like they were coming back at 1 a.m, and back from Mayo county training at 1 a.m, even club training. He said you'd be like a zombie the next day, and it's just very hard to keep it going. In fairness to Chris Barrett, he's 34 this year. He's done it for a long time. He's been up in Dublin the guts of the last decade. So his club and county really couldn't ask for more from him. But be interesting to see if him or McCaffrey are playing, or both of them are playing. But definitely, it's a tough tie for Clontarf. Very tough tie against the reigning Leinster champions.
There's some big names in Group 4, Kilmacud Crokes and Raheny. So Paul Mannion, and then on the other side Brian Fenton and Brian Howard. Keane O'Sullivan also Crokes. Castleknock led by Kieran Kilkenny against St Oliver Plunkett's with the Brogans. So definitely a lot of big names there.
A couple of massive names there. The more than what we said about, that people are very, very funny in the GA. The more than we said about Dean Rock and his free tech, and if Kieran Kilkenny does something and one of his basic skills let him down, you definitely have lads hopping all over him. You were doing the skills on the internet there, and you can't do the skills in a match. You know the way people are. I'm waiting for someone to say something to me about, like, when I make a mistake in a match or something like that from another club. You can, tell me where I can shove me 1,000 push-ups or that kind of crap, because that's the way people operate. But definitely some juicy ties there. Like, there's obviously only 2 to come out of that group of 4, so you probably think Raheny might struggle a bit, but there's going to be one kind of reasonably big hitter gone at a very, very early stage.
Yeah, like Raheny have a good team, but I saw them, I think middle of last year, maybe during the April club month, and they struggled to get, like, Fenton and Howard are always on the front foot when they're playing with Dublin, because you've so much quality around you and great runners kind of acting as decoys or whatever it might be, but they very much struggle to get the ball on the front foot and penetrate the opposition. So maybe it'll be similar here against Kilmacud Crokes. The Cork Championship this weekend, of course, Nemo are champions. They'll start out against Valley Rovers. They'll expect to win that. St Finbars, who lost the quarter final to Nemo last year, they're against Ballincollig. Clonakilty against Carrigaline. Douglas, another, I would say, nearly men guys, a team that should be making a breakthrough, and they were hammered against Nemo last year in the semi-final. So Douglas against Bishopstown, Newcestown against Ullin Rovers, and Carbery Rangers against Castlehaven. That's the Cork Championship. Not sure if you have anything to add to that now.
No, not many. It's very hard when we haven't seen anything yet. You don't know what you're expecting from a lot of those teams. Nemo, obviously, again, more than we've talked about other teams, Nemo are expecting to win Munster and contest for an All-Ireland. Obviously, that can't happen this year. So maybe opportunity knocks for one of the other teams. Maybe their eye would be slightly taken off the prize. But I think even like go to just fly through some of the other championships there. Leitrim, obviously Glencar, Manor, Hamilton are chance. They're playing it's Sean Eston against Auckland Whalon in Group 1. And it's St Mary's Kiltogue against Mohill. Then Glencar, Manor, Hamilton are playing Drumreilly and Melvin Gales against Allen Gales. The Offaly Championship is kicking off this weekend as well. And I suppose one of the probably most noteworthy things is Forban in football and it's Belmont in hurling. They're basically two different clubs joined together for the two of them. But they'll be hit more than anybody else with dual players, and I think Joe Matter, who's captain of the football in Forban, is opting out of hurling with Belmont this year, and they're going to have an awful lot of traffic. Like, they're going to play this weekend, and if they get to the finals of the two, they're going to play every weekend basically between now and the end of September. And that's really, really challenging, and there's going to be attritional rates, and there's going to be lads probably lost along the way. But it's looking like, I'd say, you're probably looking at Forban and Rode, who obviously went down to Forban in the final last year with Niall McNamee missing the majority of the game with concussion, and Brian Darby carrying a knock into it. They're probably the two heavyweights. But this weekend it's Forban against Eden Derry and Shamrocks against Bracknell in Group 1, and it's Cappin-Curr against Tullamore and Rode against Clara in Group 2.
You know the way, and this, I'm not saying this is the case in Offaly, but there are certain county championships this year where it seems like they're not being fully considered as normal county titles, that it's almost, I don't know, just playing off a championship and we'll have a winner, but this won't go into the roll of honour, because I suppose county boards are thinking some teams are going to have to opt out midway through a championship, or it might get to a county semi-final. There could have been a COVID case that week in a club, and therefore that team can't line out that weekend. I think at first I almost took it as a small bit of a slight against the club that these mightn't be considered real championships, whereas the inter-county level would, and that remains to be seen too. Because I wonder, will they start to see a couple of county finals called off because of COVID-19 cases in a club, and semi-finals, and then start to think, well, what happens if it gets to an All-Ireland final in Dublin or against Mayo, and the week of the final a team goes down, or a semi-final, and let's say Mayo get a bye to an All-Ireland final and they're up against Kerry then or something like that, and Kerry have had to go through and beat a team in their semi-final. You might have a very lopsided championship with teams knocked out because of COVID-19, and will it feel like a real title? So do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that's a sort of a sensible way to do it, or do you think it sort of diminishes it?
Yeah, it's very hard not to diminish it. I think you have to treat it as a not. It's not obviously a normal county championship, but you have to give it the same, give it the same standing as a normal county championship. If things happen and teams can't play, or games are postponed, or teams are out of a championship indefinitely as a result of a positive case, I think you deal with that as it comes. But I haven't heard any talk about that in Offaly, about teams not ending up in the roll of honour or anything like that. And I think if you win a county title, if you win your county championship, I think you're going to treat it like a county title win. If you get beaten in a county final, I think you're going to treat it like a normal county final defeat would be treated. I genuinely do. It's obviously different, unless there's really extenuating circumstances in a club, and they were missing 3 players because of COVID, or they were they ended up having to play 2 games within 5 days because of COVID related stuff or something like that. But I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that county championships aren't being treated as normal, obviously in these extenuating circumstances.
I'm waiting for confirmation, but I think that is the case in Dublin, and I think even the promotion relegation isn't happening for that reason. So if you're in Senior B in Dublin football this year and you've been trying to get up for years upon years, you now know that you can't get promoted even if you win the county title, so the incentive isn't as strong as it would have been. And I mean, obviously the county board have weighed this sort of stuff up. I have a feeling this is probably happening in other counties too, but that does take away from it a little bit. And let's say you play in a county final this year, or you're due to with Burr, and the week coming into it, let's say, and I just pull a team out of the hat, let's say you're playing against, I don't know, Tullamore, and the week of the final they have to opt out because of a COVID case in the club, and there isn't enough time to refix it because the inter-county season's about to start. You're declared champions. I mean, this sort of stuff could happen.
Yeah, no, we actually won an under-21 championship with Burr many moons ago, because the game was fixed for maybe a week before the leaving cert, and Kilcormac had a good few boys sitting the leaving cert, and they kind of, I don't know if they tried to call the county board's bluff, but they said they weren't going to play or whatever, and we ended up winning the county title, and it means absolutely zero. I wouldn't even reference that as a county final win, because the game was never played. We always thought maybe it might be played after it. It never was. So like that would not be the same. That would be totally meaningless in my view if that happened.
Yeah. So let's move on to Monaghan then. Scottstown against Trua this weekend. Castle Blaney Fogs against Latin O'Reilly. Ballybay Pierce brothers against Clontibbert O'Neill. So that's the Wiley brothers trying to keep down Conor McManus and those county champions. Inniskeen against Maheracloon. Roscommon then, so Pierces are champions here. Elfinner against Strokestown, St. Bridget's against Clonagale, Roscommon Gales against Western Gales, and St. Crone's against Furty. Michael Glavies against Tusklord Edwards, what a name for a club, of course, and Padraig Pierces against Boyle. So Pierces, of course, as I said, they are county champions. Let's move on to the Sligo Championship. Turlestrand don't seem to be out this weekend. They're the 3-in-a-row champs. So Drumcliff, Ross's Point against Tubbercurry, Giva versus Cooler Strand Hill, Eastern Harps against St Mary's, and Coolani Mulnabrina versus Calgary St Joseph's. Wicklow Championship, Blessington against Baltinglass, Avondala versus Kiltegan, St Pat's who are the champions against Newtown, Arklow Geraldines against Bray Emmets, and as you said, Ger Brennan is the manager there.
Yeah, Wicklow is a funny one. All the winners from last week are playing each other this week. And I'm not 100% sure what happens to the losers of this week. I think the losers of this week end up playing the losers in the first round. But it seems a bit messy. It just seems a bit messy. I was at the Bray match last week. I don't think Bray had won a championship match football for a couple of years. Obviously, much better known as for their hurling prowess, particularly in recent years. But they were brilliant against Rathnew last week. Load of young players, loads of pace. What are the two names? Carl McGee and Keane Lohan caused wreck inside their full forward line. Ger Brennan had them playing a fairly open, expansive type of game. Loads of kick passing. It was a fair start to his managerial career, in fairness, but Pats are still definitely the team to beat. Just chatting to a couple of lads in the press box, there was boys streaming the game live, and they were just saying if you had 10 grand and you knew that even if the championship was called off, that you pay back out, to said 10 grand investment on Pats would be a good investment, or whatever you had in the bank. But obviously Bray and a couple more will be trying to stop him.
The Antrim Championship, Nave Burra Aka versus Roger Caseman's Port Glenone, Love Jarrig against Nave Owen, Nave Seamus versus Clon Nahir and Carrick, St Mary's Aha Gallen, geez, they're serious names here, versus Nave Breed, Nave Aina against Gert Namona. And then the Kerry Club Championship, which of course feels more pointless than ever, because in previous years, if a divisional team like, let's say, East Kerry won the county championship, they can't go through to the Munster Championship, so the Kerry Club Championship winners would do it in their stead, like as happened with I think it was Austin Stacks last year. But this year there won't be a Munster Championship, so obviously this championship is even more pointless. No, not pointless, it's still nice to win all sorts of championships. But Crokes are against Temple No, Kenmare Shamrocks against Cairns O'Reilly, Austin Stacks against Dingle, and Kilcummin against Killarney. So there are a huge amount of games on this weekend, Michael Verney, just before we finish up.
Yeah, serious amount of games on this weekend. I think, as we said earlier, though, like the probably just the Dublin Championship will always get kind of a top billing, and all eyes will be on probably Dean Rock this weekend. I'd say it's great crack at Ballymun training though. I'd say there's lads knocking unbelievable crack out of this. What are we we're Thursday today? If they trained last night after Twitter blew up, I'd say it's going to be great crack. Even Friday night before training, I'd say it'd be great crack.
You can imagine them all lining up and sort of taking frees, and Dino, am I hitting this right now? And as he's standing over, or like as you're about to hit a free, if he says, "Geez, you should take an extra step back," and you're like, "Oh, how much is that now? How much for that advice?" This sort of crack. I'd say it's all kicking off, but hopefully he's taking it in good spirits, because this is the sort of thing that happens. You put your head above the parapet in Ireland, and someone is going to hit you an old crack, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, that's the way it works. Yeah.
That's the football preview. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thanks, Shane. Good man.